the thing that is actually going to give you the biggest return on your time is fixing your meetings, because you'll have fewer meetings and the meetings you do have will be more effective, which means that you can move work forward and your team members won't need you as much because they'll know exactly what they're doing. They'll understand the decision. They'll be able to move forward and not have to circle back and pull you back in. So if you fix your meetings, you will have more time for professional development.
Welcome to the Learn It All podcast, the show for leaders who believe that lifelong learning is your ultimate competitive advantage. I'm your host, Damon Lembi, 3-time best-selling author and CEO of Learn It, a live learning platform that has helped upskill over 2 million people. Joining me today, I've got a fabulous guest. Her name is Mamie Kanfer Stewart. She is an author, a leadership coach, and she's got an amazing podcast called The Modern Manager, which I think is one of the best podcasts out there when it comes to management and leadership. Mamie's a big believer that if you fix the way meetings are run and you run great meetings, it can solve everything in the world. In our conversation today, I got a wide range of topics I wanted to discuss with Mamie. Everything from what's the difference between being a manager and a leader, what are the top skills we're going to need for the future of work, and we're going to discuss the huge impact that AI is going to have on management. And last but not least, if you're a manager, you're probably spending 30 to 40% of your time in meetings. And Mamie's going to share with us some awesome secrets on how to fix and run much better meetings.
So Mamie, in a world where leaders tend to get all of the spotlight, you really focus on managers and you even call them unsung heroes. Why do you believe they're so critical for organizations?
Managers are the lifeblood of an organization, right? Without managers, we just have a bunch of people trying to work together, but no one coordinating, no one supporting, no one helping to shape and lift up the people who are doing the work. So within an organization, of course, you need leadership at the top to set vision and think about strategy, and you need people who are getting their hands in the work every single day. But it's the people in the middle who are connecting the big thinking at the top and the actual doing that's happening at the base of an organization. Those are the people that are the linchpin. Those are the people that are truly making things happen. And unfortunately, most organizations don't spend enough time and energy and don't offer enough support and investment in those managers, even though they are the ones who are the most important because they touch every part of an organization.
I love it. I mean, you're speaking our language. Question for you. Do you think somebody can be or expect them to be both a manager and a leader?
Well, yes. Actually, the simple answer is yes. The more complex answer is it depends on what you mean by manager and leader. I think these terms can get thrown around a little too much and kind of lose their meaning. And some schools of thought say, leaders are the people at the top of an organization. They're responsible for big picture. They're responsible for vision. They're responsible for the business. And managers are responsible for the day-to-day and the execution. In other ways, leadership is really about how you show up and think about vision and translate vision into the work. It's a set of skills around leadership. And then management is how you think about the people and coordinating the people and the skills around coordinating the work. And so I think there are leaders at the top of an organization who are leading and managing, and there are people embedded in at any level of an organization who are leading and managing. So I guess it depends on if you're thinking of them as nouns or as verbs.
And I agree. And to some degree, I think all of us are leaders in our own way or can be, with or without a manager or leadership title. I think it's like, how do you show up? Do you jump in and help support people? So we're all leaders. In working with managers these days, what do you see are the most common challenges or patterns that the modern managers are struggling with?
Oh, there are so many. And work just keeps getting more complicated and more complex every single day. So I feel like you have to acknowledge AI. AI is changing everything. It's changing how we do our work. It's changing how we interact with our colleagues. Seeing AI in meetings, for example, it's just making everything different. So whatever you used to do in the past may or may not serve you anymore, may not be the right skill set that you need, may or may not work for your people. So there's a whole piece around AI that is just making managing very complicated. And then we also have a super diverse workforce. We're dealing with more generations in the workplace. Many of us have global teams working with people across cultures, across geographies, across all kinds of difference. And I don't know that it's so true anymore to say like the old school version of management was you just show up and you make everybody kind of align to you. And the new way is you align to them. Because I think that model was like maybe pre-2000s. And we've already been shifting for so long towards a model of management that is servant leadership. But I think even with that shift that's already been happening for at least a decade, there's still a lot we don't yet know how to do. And managers are constantly trying to figure out, how do I work with everyone and give each person what they need? How do I delegate effectively when one person really wants some handholding and someone else is like, just tell me what to do and get off my back, right? We have to show up as managers and figure out what each person needs and then work with them in the way that serves them best. And that's hard for us too, because it means we don't get to work in the way that feels most natural and obvious for us. So I think those are kind of some of the big things, is just figuring out, how do I work with each person? And then how do I deal with the changing environment of work, whether that's AI or the more virtual teaming or anything else.
I think what you said is really important, because especially new managers, when they step into a role, they might default to thinking everybody wants to be managed the way I want to be managed, and try to manage everybody the same way, where what you're saying is you almost have to be like a chameleon and get to learn what's important and to be able to connect with each individual team member. Do you have any practical tips or advice on where somebody can start with that?
Absolutely. My favorite activity is creating a personal operating manual. And this is an activity that you do for yourself and you have every one of your team members do. And then you have conversations about it. And it is a really fun activity where you go through a process of reflection and ask yourself a ton of questions. Things like, under what circumstances do I do my best work? How do I like to be supported? What makes me really frustrated? Like, what do people do that just kind of ticks me off? How do I like to feel appreciated and celebrated? How do I want to receive feedback? What kind of working environment gives me the best sense of focus? There's just so many questions that we can reflect on for ourselves. And actually, my favorite question is, what do people often assume about me that they get wrong? And once you've done this reflection, then you share this with your team and everyone reports out. And you have a chance to really hear, oh, maybe she really loves meetings. She loves to be in collaboration mode. She loves to partner and think with people. For someone else, you find out, wow, meetings are really draining. They're hard for them because they're really introverted and it takes a lot of energy to show up. And so they need more quiet, focused time scheduled around their meetings if we want them to show up and be really engaged in a meeting. So you learn a lot about people and their working styles and their preferences simply by asking. And I like having a set of questions to work from so that everybody has time to really think before you share. If you just show up in a meeting and say, I'd love to get to know you. Tell me about how you work best. Some people are going to jump in and have great things to say because they've thought about it, or they're extroverted and they think on their feet. And other people are going to be like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to tell my boss right now. Like, how do I work best? I don't know. What do you need from me? I don't know. And we don't want to do that.
No, you don't want to do that. And also, I think it's great to send them those questions ahead of time to give them some time to think about it and prepare, because instead of just putting them on the spot, because everybody's different again. For yourself, how often do you self-reflect on how you like to be worked with, or, I don't know, look back at some of the things that you're doing and stuff like that?
Well, every time I get a new team member, I always do some version of this process with them, because I want to make sure that I understand who they are, how they like to work, what they need. And I like to make sure that they know, it's actually in one of my onboarding documents. Here's a bunch of information about me and how I like to work that you should know before you even get into the job on the first day. I want them to know that I'm a pretty hands-off person naturally. So if they need help, they're going to have to ask for it, probably more than they might have had to ask for other managers. I tend to lean on the opposite of micromanagement to what I call macro management, where I'm like, you got it? Good. Call me when you need me. So those are kinds of things I want people to know. So I reflect at least before I have a new team member and make sure that I have kind of, if anything's changed in myself, that I'm aware of that. And then occasionally, things I'll just notice about, I've been using this new tool and I haven't really introduced it to my team. And what about this is working really well for me? I wonder if this will work for anyone else. So sometimes there's just kind of organic moments where you've noticed something that's changed for you, and it gives you an opportunity to say, maybe I should tell other people about this.
Yeah, I like the idea of self-reflecting when you have a new member on the team. For me, I kind of do it quarterly. I just kind of look back and see how things have gone, where we're at, and how I've approached people management and whatnot, and then ask people, create the type of environment where people feel comfortable receiving or giving feedback, because as you like to talk about, which I think is incredibly important, is the ability to receive feedback in a way that people feel comfortable and safe to do so.
Yeah, we talk a lot in general around managing and giving feedback. It's such a hard thing for so many managers to do. And there are so many resources and blogs and podcasts and all this stuff about giving feedback. And I like to take the different approach, which is giving feedback. Yes, it's hard and it's a skill and you got to do it. But if everyone actually learned how to receive feedback, it would make giving feedback a heck of a lot easier. And there are ways that we can receive feedback. It's a skill as well around emotional regulation, around really listening with curiosity. There are ways that we can manage ourselves to show up in a feedback conversation and use it to help us get better instead of allowing that conversation to be awkward and frustrating and emotionally triggering.
But how do you go about setting up a situation where to open a door for somebody to give you feedback?
As a manager, the first thing to know is that people don't want to give you feedback. At least your direct reports don't, right? Your manager might want to, maybe a peer, but it is really hard to get feedback from your direct reports. So there are a couple of things that I do and many of my clients do that really help kind of open the door and over time get you the feedback that you need. So the first is to ask for it regularly. If you only ask for feedback once a year when you're doing a performance review type conversation, it is unlikely that someone is going to share it with you. But if you ask every time you have a one-on-one with your team member and you're sharing with them any feedback you have, in addition to all of your kind of real-time feedback, if you always ask them at the end of that conversation, what can I do differently to better support you? That is one way to ask for feedback. And by asking it every single time, they might eventually surface something. The second is to share something that you are actively working on getting better at and ask them for feedback about that. And framing it as, I'm really trying to lead our meetings better. Like I know meetings are, they're tough. They're not always the most engaging. Do you have any ideas for how I could lead our meetings more effectively and make them more fun or make them more engaging? And when you ask about something specific, it allows the person to, one, hone in on something versus the general, like, what feedback do you have for me? And two, it shows them that you're really serious about feedback because you are actively trying to improve something rather than an open-ended, potentially hollow question or kind of automatic forced question of like, I know I'm supposed to ask for feedback, so I'll just ask. So giving them a specific thing. And then the third thing is to ask them about something that they're really good at that you think you could get better at. So if you notice you have a team member who is really organized, you could say to them, I know I'm not the most organized person. I'd love to learn from you. How do you stay so organized? What ideas do you have for me to become more organized? So it's similar to the first about saying, here's something I'm trying to get better at. How can you help me? Here you're leaning into their strength and you're specifically saying, I want to learn from you. And the more you create this dynamic between the two of you, that this relationship is a two-way street where I want to learn from you and I hope that you're going to learn from me. I'm going to give you feedback and I hope you're going to give me feedback. It creates more trust in the relationship and more psychological safety, which are the foundations of being able to have healthy feedback conversations.
I really like what you just said right there around, I noticed this is something you're really good at. I want to get better at that. I'm gonna steal that one and try it. I'm pretty good at the one right before, where, for instance, when I was writing my book, I was very open about areas where I didn't think I was doing a good job at it. So I would share it with somebody, just like I do when I do a solo episode before I go live with it. I'll send it to members of my team and say, I'm not sure this is fantastic. Can you just please share with me what I did well and more importantly, what I can get better at? But now coming in and saying, hey, Courtney, you're super organized. I want to get more organized. How can you help me? Well, I think that will absolutely open the door because receiving feedback is literally fuel for when it comes to learning.
Totally. And I think the other piece of this that's so important is that when someone does give you feedback, the first thing out of your mouth should be, thank you. Thank you for giving me this feedback. Even if you disagree, even if every part of you wants to scream at them and say like, really? Like that's the feedback you have for me? Don't do that. Simply say thank you. And then you can ask questions if you want more information. You can say, I'd love to have some time to just process what you said. Can I schedule some time tomorrow to talk through this a little bit more? Because I would really like to continue this conversation, but I want to think about it first. You can follow up with all kinds of things, but you have to say thank you. That is the moment where the person who just took this risk by giving you some critical feedback gets reinforced that they did the right thing. If you jump right in with questions, even if you're coming from a place of real curiosity, can you tell me an example of when I did that? Or, can you explain a little bit more? I really want to make sure I understand. Even questions like that, which to us might seem a totally natural, like I just want more information, to the person who's receiving those questions can feel like, oh, they're questioning if this is real. They're defensive. They're, pushing the boundaries and they're going to try and maneuver out of this, which is not what you want, because that's going to shut down the conversation and shut down any possibility of future feedback. But if you start with thank you, you're reinforcing this is the right conversation to be having.
Yeah, and saying thank you along with being mindful of your body language. I mean, I know
Totally.
I always am, is like, I don't want to be all wrapped up and tight with it because people could see that. And when you do that as a manager, as a leader, or just in general, you're going to prevent people in the future from wanting to give you feedback. And so thank you is a great little pause, actually, and be intentional about your body language. And also, I think listeners, you got to understand feedback at the end of the day, it's just data. And the more data you can get, it can help you decide what you want to do with it. So you try not to take it personal, but it's a great fuel for learning, like I mentioned before. So I want to switch gears a little bit. You look at the Gallup polls about how people are so disengaged in the workforce today. I mean, it's one of the all-time lows. Now, your key focus is really around running effective meetings, or at least one of them, which is incredibly important. Do you think, to start with, that by being able to learn how to run more effective meetings, do you think that we can drive the engagement up in organizations?
I think we can change everything in an organization with meetings. To me, if you ever watched that movie, My Big Fat Greek Wedding, and the dad is puts Windex on everything. Oh, your elbow hurts? Put some Windex on it. You have a headache? Spray some Windex on your head. Whatever it is. To me, that's meetings. Meetings can solve everything because so much happens in meetings. It's where relationships are formed. It's where power dynamics play out, where decisions get made, where ideas get shared. Right? There's so much in our meetings that when we shift how our meetings happen, it has so many ripple effects into how people feel valued, whether or not they know what they're doing and can go off and execute on the work that we've just decided on. They're like the center, they're the heartbeat of organizations. So yes, I think we can drive engagement when we change our meetings.
So I've done a deep dive into your work, and we don't have time to cover pre, during, post, and everything. But one of the things that I really liked was the pre-work. So let's kind of start there with who should be in meetings, when is a meeting even necessary?
So there are a number of reasons why you should have a meeting. And then there's one reason why you shouldn't. And the reason why you shouldn't have a meeting is to give people information. If you have sensitive information, if it's a confidential conversation, there are times where you would want to share information, show respect, make sure the nuance is understood. But a lot of us have meetings to give updates. And we don't need to have a meeting for that. That is an engagement killer when you're sitting there listening to an update on a project for 45 minutes and you've said nothing because someone is just reporting out. So there are other modes that we can use for updates that are much more effective. So we can talk about that later if you want. But you want to have meetings for reasons like brainstorming ideas. Yes, you can do some brainstorming individually, and I actually recommend that people start brainstorming beforehand. But there's nothing that quite compares to the energy that comes up when people's ideas are bouncing off of each other. So there's something really wonderful and magical that happens when you're brainstorming as a group. Decision making. Yes, you can make decisions by email, but again, it's helpful if you're discussing something real time, having a chance to really tease out the nuance and get into the complexity of something and get into healthy disagreement about things, and then come to a conclusion and make a decision. Same thing with planning out work, a whole bunch of other things, building relationships. There's many reasons, and I have them all in my book.
And your podcast.
Yes, there are lots of places.
Let's talk a little bit about when you're preparing for meetings, what's the best way to set yourself up for success?
So the most important thing to do before any meeting is to figure out what your desired outcome or your goal for that meeting is. And it sounds very simple, but it's actually harder than you might imagine in the sense that we're not used to thinking in this way. It's a shift in your mindset. We tend to think about the purpose of a meeting. The purpose of the meeting is to review last quarter's budget and, figure out a plan for what we're going to do differently going forward. Or the purpose of the meeting is to make sure everybody knows what's going on with this customer so that when we go into our call or pitch with them, we're ready to go. Those are activities to review, to discuss, to decide, to brainstorm. And activities are wonderful. Those are the things you're going to do in the meeting, but they're not the goal of the meeting. The goal is the outcome that you are driving towards. And you want to know exactly what that outcome is. Are you in an actual decision-making meeting where the outcome is a decision is made? Or are you in a exploratory conversation where we're going to talk about the decision, we're going to talk about the options, but we're not actually going to make a decision. We're just going to generate some clarity around which options we're considering so that we can then send them up the chain for feedback from the higher ups. Or we're going to go out and ask some more questions and do a little more data gathering before we come together for that actual decision-making meeting. And that nuance matters because it matters on who's invited to the meeting, how people are going to prepare for the meeting, how the meeting conversation is going to flow, and most importantly, how people are going to feel at the end of the meeting. Because if you've ever sat in a meeting and you thought you were making a decision and someone else thought that we were not making a decision, you walk out of the meeting frustrated that the decision wasn't made. And someone else walks out of the meeting thinking, we just did exactly what we're supposed to do. And that is not the way that you want your meeting participants to leave.
I like how you describe it as well as you don't want to look at meetings as a verb, but as a noun. And so give me an example of you leave that budget meeting and what does success look like as far as everybody's on the same page of how specific does it need to be?
It should be as specific as you need it to be to drive to that outcome. So if we're talking about a budget meeting, you might have a desired outcome or a goal for the meeting to have a final approved budget for the next year. You might have an outcome that is, we want to have directional alignment on the budget. And the next step is going to be that someone's going to go and play around with the numbers and come back with a proposed budget for the next conversation. So you just need to get as specific as you need it to be to know, are you achieving that goal at the end of the meeting? Can you check it off and say, yes, we achieved that? Do you know exactly what people need to be there? If you leave it too broad, you might not be sure which people should be there. But if you're specific, you'll know who to invite and how to have them prepare. What materials you need to send them in advance to read, what materials you need to have prepped for presenting in the conversation to be able to pull them up quickly when the time comes. So it's really just a matter of the clarity that you need to be able to plan the meeting and facilitate the meeting effectively.
And when it goes back to the pre-work, I heard you say, which I'm going to do a better job myself of, is say, hey, this is mandatory reading or this isn't mandatory reading. And maybe it should take 5-10 minutes. And helping set people up for success, I think at the end of the day, it's going to make your time much more effective during the actual meeting. So you're not trying to catch up during the 1 hour you have together. And another big mistake I've heard you speak to is having a meeting without making sure that the decision maker is even involved or included in that meeting.
Yeah, this is why you have to know what are you trying to achieve in the meeting. And it happens a surprising number of times where if you're not totally clear about the meeting purpose or the meeting desired outcome or goal, then you get in the conversation and you realize, oh, we actually can't make this decision because we need someone from finance, or we need my boss, or we need someone else who's on vacation today in this meeting in order to actually finalize this decision. And so you want to make sure that the meeting is designed and the right people are there. And if we go back to your comment about pre-work, yeah, you can't just send something over the transom. Please see the attached. That is not giving someone clear direction around pre-work. Give them the materials, and it could be a voice message or a video message or a document that was pre-existing or a bullet point list that you just jotted down or an article to read. It could be anything that is going to help the person gain context so that when they come into the conversation, they are ready to contribute, and we don't need to waste time in the meeting walking through slides or filling people in, because all of that time up front, you've probably felt it, it can expand from, I'm going to do a 5-minute recap of what's going on, get everyone up to speed. And that 5 minutes turns into 10 minutes and turns into 20 minutes. And now half the meeting is gone with me just explaining things and people asking questions about the context. And we haven't even gotten into the real meat of the conversation yet. So you want to give people the materials they need, the instructions of what to do with them. Please read this. Please send back 3 questions you have that you'd like us to answer in the meeting. Please come ready to share what resonated for you, what you think we can learn from this article that would apply to our work. You can give them instructions for how to think when they're looking at those materials, and then the approximate time. This should take you no more than 5 minutes, or please set aside about 30 minutes to get through this. It's quite a bit of material, but I think it'll be really helpful for us all to have read this beforehand.
So when it comes to meetings, like you said, it could basically change everything. So why do organizations not set aside a budget and invest in their team to become better at meetings? And my second part of that question is, how can we approach that conversation with our leaders to try to get some budget to get better at it?
Well, I think organizations don't put a lot of money and energy into a lot of things. So it's not just meetings that are singled out as being unworthy, to be fair. But meetings are one of those things that are so pervasive. Everyone is just kind of used to them. And we kind of assume wrongly that this is how meetings are. And the expectation is people are just going to run meetings. We haven't really understood that meeting leadership is a skill set that people can learn. It's a process that people can develop and learn. And when you think about meetings more like giving feedback or delegating or anything else, then it becomes a little bit easier to wrap your brain around the idea that, oh, this is a skill set. This is a part of my job that I need to learn how to do. And I could use some resources to be able to do that effectively. The other piece of this is that for a long time, there weren't a lot of resources on how to lead effective meetings. It's a relatively new topic when it comes to management, unlike things around emotional intelligence and other forms of leadership that have been kind of in the waters for many, many, many years.
When it comes to quantifying, turning to the CFO or whoever and say, hey, look, I want to share with you the cost of running ineffective meetings. Do you have any exercises that they could look at to quantify what the wasted time and money involved with the poor meetings?
Absolutely. So the simplest one is calculate the cost of your meetings. How many hours are people spending in meetings every single week? What are their salaries? And you just do the math and you have a number. It says, this is how much money each meeting is costing us, or this is how much money we're spending on our meetings every single week. And general research says that about a third of meetings are considered unproductive. I think the costs are a little bit higher than that when it comes to engagement. But I think each team can kind of figure out for themselves how many of their meetings are really working for them and driving how many of their meetings are really working for them and driving work forward, and how many of their meetings are kind of falling short. So that's the first thing, is just come up with a financial analysis of how much time we're spending and the salary of those people. You got your number. But the second way to look at it is lost productivity. Every hour that you spend in a meeting isn't spent doing something else. So when meetings are really productive work time, because you're doing the work of making decisions, of brainstorming, of aligning on projects, of planning things out, building relationships, and you're moving work forward, that's a good use of time. That's productive. When you're talking in circles and going off on tangents and leaving a meeting going, did I really need to be there? And what did we get done? And what am I supposed to do next? And did we make a decision? That was a lost opportunity, that hour that you could have been spending doing something else. So if you tally up from that perspective, it's really easy to see we can gain 5, 10, 15 hours per person per week back. That's a bunch of time that could be spent moving towards other goals, on professional development, on developing relationships, on self-improvement. There's so many things that we can be doing with that time. That's a real cost to an organization too.
I totally agree. And at the end of the day, it can, hurt your relationships with other people on your team because they feel like maybe they're not being respected, their time's not being respected, they're getting frustrated, and it can have an absolute ripple effect to poor meetings. One question I have is, and this is, I just came off a 2-day in-person brainstorming with our team. My team's all distributed. Do you think that brainstorming meetings can be as productive virtually as they are in person?
Yes and no. So there are things that I love that technology enables us to do that is better than when we're in person together. So here's a quick example. Writing on sticky notes. I love sticky notes. My office is filled with them. But when you're brainstorming on sticky notes, which is a great way to brainstorm, one idea per sticky note, write them down, stick them on the wall. We can cloud cluster, we can move them around, we can vote, we can use little sticky dots or marks to vote. That's super fun, very high engagement, great for in person. The downside is that when people are standing around a wall, it's really hard to read people's handwriting. Even when you're using a Sharpie, sometimes it's like, what did they write down? I can't quite make out that handwriting and that font's really small. And that kind of doesn't work so well, right? Another problem is that even if you say these ideas are anonymous, I know whose handwriting that is. I know who put that idea on there. And so that can be a barrier for some people to feel like they can truly share their ideas. When you're brainstorming virtually and you're using a Miro board or a mural board, you have an opportunity to, one, get people's real thinking because nobody knows. You can all log in with your little anonymous creatures and no one knows who's putting which idea out there. And secondly, everyone can read all the ideas. You can zoom in on an idea and read the font as it got smaller and smaller as more text went into the box. You can see the whole board and you can still just as easily move things around, do voting, all kinds of stuff. So the energy might not quite be the same because you're not all physically co-located, but the value that you get from having true anonymity and everyone really being able to see the ideas and respond to them can offset some of that loss of energy.
So I see. So yeah, basically you get everybody in a room, the energy's way up, right? And everybody's pumped up, you get to see each other. But at the end of the day, maybe there's not enough psychological safety for people to really share what they're thinking. And so it could all even out with the value. So there are pluses and negatives on that. When it comes to AI in meetings, what has made it a game changer, in your opinion, for making meetings more efficient or better?
I think AI note-taking is the place where most people are invested in AI tools when it comes to their meetings right now. And it's very helpful to give you a starting point for a meeting recap. And a recap is one of the techniques and approaches that I teach my clients because when we walk out of a meeting, if we haven't articulated, these are the next steps, who is doing what by when, these are the key takeaways that we need to make sure are captured and shared with some people who maybe weren't in the meeting but need to know what's going on. And here's the decision we made and why that was the decision. It can be really frustrating and lead to rehashing of decisions, people being confused about what the next steps are, right? All the good work that we just did in the meeting can kind of dissipate if we don't have it captured so that we can reference it and share it. So AI note takers are awesome. The thing is though, we can't quite rely on them fully. We can't yet be, all right, you captured the notes and now I can just hit send and I don't have to look at them ever. So it's a really good practice in the last few minutes of the meeting to go through whatever the AI note taker was capturing and review it as a team and make sure that, yes, it got the right next steps. It captured the decision correctly. It flagged the right important notes, or you can add them or edit them if you need to, because a lot of ideas get thrown out in meetings. Things like, oh yeah, we really should follow up on that, issue with the client and make sure that it's resolved. Who's the we that should follow up, right? Or, oh, let's explore that at our next meeting. Okay, are we actually scheduling a meeting about this topic or we're just saying that to move the conversation forward? AI doesn't know the difference. That's where we have to be the ones in the meeting with our team members to decide what the actual next steps are, make sure that you have the actual decisions, and we've flagged whatever information is critical for people to know about.
No, I agree. And it also, getting back to clarity, helps you be more intentional on kind of spelling it out. So is Bob responsible for doing this? Is Matt, what are the dates that we're going to get this done so that you have that? Have you ever used the note taker and then gone back, speaking of feedback, and run it through and say, hey, can you be a business executive coach and give me feedback on how well I ran this meeting and what can I do better next time?
I have not yet tried that, but I've heard about people doing that, so I might have to give it a try.
No, that's something that I've been doing, whether it's a podcast or running meetings. It's just going back and getting some feedback myself on what can be done better, or what went well. And also, have you tried the Plod, where for in-person meetings, the tool that captures everything for in-person as well?
I haven't. I don't have very many in-person meetings, but I will have to try it.
Yeah, I just got it for the first time since we were all here together, because I love the note taking because it allows you to be a little bit even more present. I think it's great to write down notes. You still do, but it captures everything. When it comes to AI in general, what are you recommending for your customers and people out there as far as what does AI ready look like for a manager?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm not 100% sure how to answer that, so I'm going to give you an answer, and if you don't like it, you can tell me. Which is, there's two pieces, I think. The first is that we need to understand how to safely use AI ourselves and how we can then support our team members to safely and securely use AI. It is a massive tool with a lot of opportunity, and we also have a lot of risk associated with it. If you put in personal information or sensitive information or confidential information, we don't always know where that's going into the ethers. We don't know who's going to have access to that. So you really need to understand what is an appropriate way to use AI, and you should be talking to your HR department, to your technology team, whoever is responsible for setting AI policies. Make sure that you understand what those are and that you have clarity so that you can then support your team members to make sure that they're being appropriate with use of AI. So that's the first part, is just understanding it. And then I think the second part is really using it to be a better manager, not necessarily to write better copy, or you can use it to plan your meetings. Actually, that's one of the new things I'm teaching around, is how to use it to help you figure out what your goal of the meeting is, to plan your agenda, figure out what your pre-work should be, but to really use it to build better relationships, to use it to help you think about your team and the way that you're collaborating and the way you can support each person. So, for example, you can create a fake profile in a chat on ChatGPT for each of your team members, and call them by their initials or come up with a fake name for each person and feed it information about that person. If you know their Myers-Briggs profile, put that in. If you know some of their context, their background, of the things that they like to do, put that in there. And then you can have a conversation with your AI and say, I need to give this person feedback. Here's the situation. How might I frame this to them in a way that would be helpful for them to really hear it? Or, I really want to help this person grow. Here's their current job description. Here's the job they said they want next. What are some opportunities? What kinds of activities or what kinds of opportunities would be good for them to experience that would help them get and move in the right direction towards that next promotion? So we can really use AI to help us think better as managers and show up better when we're building relationships and supporting our team members.
Well, I really do like your response, because you started with, you got to know what your AI governance is within your organization. So for instance, if Copilot is the authorized tool, you can't be putting company or personal information into a public chat GPT. I mean, so you got to be very clear with that and to work well with your team. And I really like the idea of whether you have DISC scores or Myers-Briggs, that you're using it as a way to even role play to a degree with it, to figure out how you can best set yourself up for success, and creating what you said in there, creating a stronger relationship, a human type, a better human relationship. Because at the end of the day, I really believe a tool is just a tool. It's how you use it. And I think you would agree how important critical thinking is going to be moving forward in the future.
Absolutely. And we cannot just take anything that comes out of any AI tool and use it and trust it as is, right? We have to be critical thinkers first and foremost. We have to ask good questions, because it's not going to tell us when our questions are bad, at least not yet. So if you ask it a bad prompt, it's going to give you a less than ideal response. So you have to be thoughtful about what you're asking, thoughtful about your information you're giving it, and then thoughtful about what it's feeding back to you and how you can use it appropriately. And as long as we are being good critical thinkers, then we can show up for our team members more prepared, more effective than if we were trying to do it all on our own.
Have you worked with any clients who have already started engaging where the manager's working with both agents and humans as far as leading a team or managing a team? I
don't think so, not yet.
Yeah, no, I haven't either, but that is something that comes up quite a bit. You're getting to the point where what's going to happen where we have a team that's both humans and agents down the line.
So that's going to be really fascinating. I'm going to do some research on that one.
That, and I saw that MIT study that said about 95% of AI projects have been failing. I don't know if you've seen that, but what can a manager do, I guess, to be more transparent with their team about where AI is coming down the line?
I mean, I think like many other topics that we have to deal with at work, it's really helpful as a manager if you are at least staying connected to the changes that are happening in your workplace, whether that's changes with AI or changes in your marketplace or in your industry or in your field. And so if you think about that as being part of your own professional development, maybe it's reading an article on LinkedIn, once every week or two, or or listening to a podcast or watching a video on YouTube, and just kind of saying, these are things that I just want to be up to date on because I want to be able to show up ahead of the game and not be behind the curve when it comes to the changes that are happening in our work.
When it comes to a manager who's already super busy and maybe they don't have the time for their professional development, or they're not finding the time, do you have any advice or tips for how they can pick up learning opportunities, or even in the cracks of the moment?
All right, number one, I hope you don't hate my answer. Fix your meetings. If you fix your meetings, you're going to have so much more time in your day. Seriously. We think about productivity as like, prioritization and time management and building better routines and habits and automating on software. And all those things are true. And you should be doing all of those things when you have time to learn all of those things and do all those things. But the thing that is actually going to give you the biggest return on your time is fixing your meetings, because you'll have fewer meetings and the meetings you do have will be more effective, which means that you can move work forward and your team members won't need you as much because they'll know exactly what they're doing. They'll understand the decision. They'll be able to move forward and not have to circle back and pull you back in. So if you fix your meetings, you will have more time for professional development. But that aside, if you don't have time to fix your meetings yet and you want something a little faster, right? There's all the time in the world when we're doing other things to listen to podcasts. I'm a huge podcast junkie. And it's, when I'm riding my Peloton, it's when I'm riding the subway, it's when I'm in a taxi, it's when I'm sitting at bed at night instead of reading a book for fun, I might read an article, right? There's so many little moments in the day when we pick up our phone to scroll Instagram or check our email when you're standing at the line at the grocery store. Instead, go on LinkedIn and find an article to read. Or, when you're sitting at dinner and you want something to talk about with your partner, right? Make some plan with them that we're going to spend 2 or 3 minutes each reading a quick article and then sharing with each other what we learned. There are opportunities to plug these little things in. It doesn't have to be a big hour-long activity. It can be a 5-minute thing.
Absolutely. I like what you're saying. You need to be intentional with your time. Think about where you're spending it. And like on Mamie's podcast, she has a bunch of solos that are 5 to 10 minutes long. You can just go in, grab one of those, and boom. It's like a little snack learning that you have opportunity there. And when it goes back to fixing meetings, all of that you mentioned is true. The other thing is when you leave a meeting that was successful, I think you're more energized and you feel better, and it's going to make you more productive. Yes. That's another big plus on it. Now, you wrote a book about meetings, Momentum, several years ago. What, if anything, have you learned or changed your mind on when it comes to running meetings since that time?
Oh, such a great question. Well, first, I didn't talk very much about technology in that book because it was 2017. It was before real virtual meetings were all the rage, before hybrid meetings. So I've definitely learned a lot in the past couple of years about how to apply good meeting practices in this new world. I remember being on conference calls back in the day, right? 2016, 2017, we had conference calls where everyone's a disembodied voice. Very different than when we're all staring at each other on Zoom and you can see yourself and, fixing your hair and all those things. So there's a lot that I've learned about how to make hybrid meetings work better. For example, with teams where some people are in person and some people are remote, I always recommend that everyone have their own laptop, even the people in person, so that you have good close-up camera shots of each person, not the mounted wall camera where every person in the room is a teeny tiny little head and the people who are virtual are giant. It's not a good equalizer in that way, both from the sense that it's hard to read body language and facial expression if you're not in the room, and also because it creates a very clear dynamic that those people are together and I'm not there. And so when everyone has their own camera, even if you're using a shared microphone on the side of the table, that's fine. But have your own camera so that everybody shows up on the screen equally.
Oh, I love it. I love it. What do you hope the modern manager looks like in the future of the workforce?
I love this question so much. I guess my hope for modern managers going forward is that, one, they show up as themselves in a way that also best supports their people, right? Like, I don't think managers should bend over backwards to serve each person differently to the extent that it is so hard for them that they don't get to show up and be their best self, right? It's really about finding the way that you can show up and do your best work and be your best self in service of every single person on your team. So I think that's the first piece is managers, you got a hard job out there. And I hope that we can find ways to do it that feel really nourishing and exciting, and also get the respect that you deserve for doing the work that you do every single day to make teams work, to make businesses run.
As a parent of two young kids, I've learned a lot about managing from being a parent. What advice or tips can you give parents that they can learn about managing and vice versa?
Oh, managing kids and managing a team are so similar. It is amazing. I have taken strategies that I've learned from the workplace and applied them to my kids. Actually did this when we were in Disney many years ago. I now have teenagers. And the kids were all complaining about all the things and didn't want to wait in line, all this stuff. So we went and we sat down and we had lunch. And I pulled out the map and I said, all right, guys, what's our plan for today? Where do we want to go? What do we want to see? And the kids helped construct the path that we were going to take to get to all of the rides and the activities that they wanted to go to. And the fighting stopped because they understood that we were in one part of the park and we couldn't make the next ride on the other side of the park. That was a ridiculous thing, even though that's desperately what they wanted to do. Suddenly it made sense to them. When I started treating them, and they were like 4 and 5, right? When I started treating them as partners in this work of how we're going to make this day really fun, it totally changed. And then the same thing at work. I had a moment where I was at home with my daughter, who was about 7 at the time. She asked for some oatmeal. I pulled it out of the fridge. It happened to have raisins in it because my other daughter likes oatmeal with raisins. I gave it to her and she was like, I don't want the raisins. It's like, okay, fine. So I was standing at the trash can, picking out the raisins from her oatmeal one at a time. And I caught myself and I was like, what the heck am I doing? This is ridiculous. She can take her own raisins out. And I brought it back over to her and I said, you're 7, you can take out your own raisins. And then I went to work the next day and I was like, you know what? What are all the things that I'm doing for my team members that they should be doing for themselves? Why am I babying them? Like, they can handle some of this stuff. I just need to make sure that they feel empowered and supported to do that. So there are all of these moments between parenting and managing that we can learn from our behavior and apply good strategies from one side to the other and break bad habits from one side to the other.
That's great. I love it. And great place to end. Where can our audience connect with you at?
Well, you can listen to my podcast and learn and see my YouTube channel, all that stuff at themodernmanager.com. I'm The Modern Manager on YouTube and everywhere. And you can find out more about my coaching at mamieks.com, MAMIEKS.com. And I have all my meeting resources at meteor.com, MEETEOR.com. And then I'm on all the socials.
Great. And I'll put those links in the show notes. And for our listeners out there, this one's easy. I always like to give people a challenge. Look, we're all in meetings. So what I want you to do, whether you're leading a meeting or you're stepping into a meeting, think about what you could do better next time or what could be done differently. So we focus on outcomes. And share this episode with some people you know who run meetings or lead meetings so they can go out and get Mamie's content information and check out our podcast so we could all fix the world or make the world get better by running better meetings. So until next time, everybody, stay curious, keep learning. Thank you, Mamie. Have a great day, everybody. See ya.
One thing I always say to people is you reserve the right to change your mind. If you do something and you later realize it's not working, or there's new information, new circumstances,